You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is November 30th, 2020, and we're going to have Michael W. Hall on, as well as Jared Murphy. Jared, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on again.
Man, awesome, man. I love you doing these shows with me, and it certainly makes it more interesting, and definitely love the way you present everything. It's awesome.
It's been so fun to bounce stuff off with you, and it just turned into a natural progression where of all the things that I've done from research to writing to where we are, it's like just doing these shows together has been just absolutely fun and awesome.
I want to talk to Michael about the monolith that has been discovered, but you also have something else you want to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, but first, that 8-mile long wall of pictographs and drawings of either fields and animals that was discovered. That's just is the exact kind of find that is not the typical couple objects in the ground, but an 8-mile long wall, and we'll have to get into it in the show.
Yeah, we definitely will. And just so everybody knows, if we're talking about this, down in the description below, I'll put links so you can see pictures of this 8-mile long wall that was just discovered. So just make sure you check the description for the links so you can follow along during the show. So we'll be right back with Michael W. Hall right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. Today we have Jared Murphy with us along with Michael W. Hall. How are you doing today, Michael?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful, crispy, clear day out here in the Pacific Northwest after we were recovering from Thanksgiving and all that tryptophan.
It's actually snowing here in northern Alabama right now. Jared, how are you doing? Did you get some of that storm that blew through?
The clouds got pretty dark, and then they parted their ways, and we got from a beautiful 22 degrees up to 30 and no snow.
Oh, awesome. So I wanted to talk to you guys about the monolith that was discovered. Michael, you want to give me your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, I love those kinds of things. Of course, I remember back in the old days, there was a performance artist by the name of Christo. I don't know if you remember that name. Who would literally take like the Golden Gate Bridge and cover it in a giant wrapping for Christmas or something like that, out of the blue. All of a sudden, you'd wake up one morning and there'd be some major performance art around the world. And initially, I didn't know if this was, like you said, a monolith from 2001, A Space Odyssey, or someone, trying to promote something. And so what I did is kind of scrutinize the video from the law enforcement officers that were doing the counting of the sheep in that area by helicopter when they found this thing. And then I was able to kind of like take some screenshots of the video and then like zoom in. And the first thing I noticed was the rivets on the leading edge all around the square monolith. And so I'm initially going, okay, well, it's got to be man-made if it's got rivets. Of course, those stories, when you first read them on the internet, are very spotty, and they don't tell you all the details. So you have to kind of get on Twitter and start, looking around to get all the details. But once I figured out that it was a man-made thing, then I started digging in further. And of course, that's when the information came out, at least it was reported, that this monolith had been there for quite a few years. Literally, when they did a Google Earth search for that GPS coordinated area, they found that they could go all the way back to 2015 and it would show up. But before that, it was gone. It was not there. So it looked as if it was some kind of performance art put there in the middle of nowhere and probably undiscovered for quite a few years until just recently. That's my initial info.
What do you think, Jared?
Well, it's one heck of a promo stunt, and based on I'm just super shocked about the length of time that it's been there. And so it makes me wonder, was it a movie set deal? Was it, a promo that they were going to use to launch something, or a TV show, or was it something that was supposed to be part of a promo kit? It just, in the evolution of whatever it was for, did it just not happen? Was it something to do with Burning Man? Was it for a festival? Was it something that was just put there for ultimately a corporate product placement? Whether it was, promoting a movie, promoting a show, promoting a streaming series show, and then it just didn't get used. It never got found in time, or and then why not leave it there for the mystery of it? But then the fact that it got moved, and that I guess from what I'm reading, it's shown back up somewhere else.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that yet.
In Romania or Armenia or something like that?
Yeah, and I guess the only question is whether or not, is it the identical object, or is it a pair? Is it, is it a coordinated effort?
Okay, well let's tear that scenario apart, because indeed, if there was a film crew that went out the day after Thanksgiving, which would have been the 27th of November, and found that it was missing then, and it supposedly went missing just maybe hours before they even got there, because they were seeing the tire tracks in the sand, supposedly, that was hauling this thing away. That's the 27th. Today is the 30th. And you're saying that it popped up somewhere else around the world. The way that thing was embedded into the bedrock, mounted in there, it was quite substantially done. I can't imagine that someone could get that monolith flown to a location and installed within 2 days, the 28th and the 29th, for instance. So that would be quite amazing.
Yeah, if you want to pull it up, there's the at least an article I just plopped on quick that says it's shown up in Romania.
Okay, let's go to that little. I'm screen sharing right now. Another mysterious monolith has been discovered in Romania. Let me click on it, see if I can get it larger and see if there's any text we can read.
Now, the funny thing about that one is that you can actually see the dirt around it where somebody had buried it, and there's all this extra dirt left over from it taking up space in the dirt hole.
Yes. And here's the weird thing that I'm noticing. I don't know if you guys noticed this. It seems to be a triangular hole in the ground, as opposed to a rectangular monolith, which I was assuming that this thing was rectangular, given the camera angles and the shadows, and I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm not seeing.
Yeah,
I saw the structure that it was standing on. I wish we knew how heavy it was. I would think that they wouldn't want it to fall over, and it must have been. There must have been a lot of weight on it.
It must have been, although I understand that it was hollow and not a solid structure.
Okay.
I think it's just a piece of art.
Yeah, I just don't see another. Oh, you think somebody seriously put their metal art out there and that it wasn't like a promo for a show?
Well, it could be a promo for a show, but I think that I think it's out there. I think it's been put out there. I don't think it has anything to do with aliens.
Okay.
Oh, no.
I finally got the thing popped up to populate the story. So let me read this for everyone if you want us to, just shortly here. It says, after this monolith was discovered, before disappearing in Utah, oh, listen to this. After this monolith was discovered, in parentheses, before disappearing in Utah, into parentheses, another was apparently spotted in Romania. Let's see if we can get to the details here. In case you thought the story of the mysterious metallic monolith couldn't get any weirder, just remember it's 2020 and anything is possible. After the surprising discovery and subsequent disappearance of the monolith in the middle of Utah desert early this month, it seems a similar object has been found in Romania. A structure that appears to be identical to the one in the Utah desert was found at the Batca, Batca, Domenil Hill in Romania on, get this, November 26th. No way. That's the day before this thing disappeared on the 27th.
Huh.
And according to the Mirror, of course, this is the Mirror reporting this.
Copycat.
As was the case with the monolith found in Utah, it's not clear where this one came from and who installed it.
Yeah,
okay,
but
there you go.
It's a copycat.
Do you think?
I mean, you could still see that if you look at the picture of that's not the Michael the picture you're looking at there. That's the one that was found in Utah. If you look at the picture of the one that was found in Romania, you could see the dirt around the base of it, where like it was just buried recently, and there's still dirt there that didn't fit in the hole because the monolith is in the hole.
I don't see where I can find a photograph of the Romania one. So anyway, I can't compare it, but I'll take your word for it. Indeed, that would maybe, you know what? No, it wouldn't explain why there was a triangular hole in the ground in Utah, supposedly, when the thing was gone. I thought this thing was a rectangular object to begin with. But anyway, I think it's probably some performance art, and maybe it's there's going to be a bunch of them uncovered around the world. Who knows?
Yeah.
I guess it's funner than crop circles right now.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I'll tell you, I couldn't scroll my Facebook wall without seeing it 20 times.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny about it. It's just it's funny. It's not like we don't know what it's from. Ironically, I never really liked either of those movies. I tried. Great. You throw up the monolith. You're either a good metal artist or you're trying to create a buzz for a show. I could get that. But then, remember when that one, I hate to say it, but I'm bringing up Planet of the Apes. Remember when that YouTube video made it out that they were trying to show a monkey running a AK-47 with a rebel group? Do you remember that? It was a promo for Planet of the Apes, but they released a YouTube video of what was supposed to be accidentally a chimp grabbing an AK-47 and then shooting it up, and then in reality it was a promo for the new Planet of the Apes movies, and just this thing just kind of screams the same thing, but obviously no one's claimed.
That was a fake video? That I thought that was real.
No, it was part of the Planet of the Ape promo.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was a while ago. That's the one that it makes me think of. But it sounds like from what Michael's saying that this first one's been around for a little while.
Well, and who knows if that report is true or not? But from what they're saying, is that, of course, we can all go to Google Earth and punch in the GPS coordinates once they were found. Initially they didn't give the GPS coordinates. Do you remember that? Because the excuse was they didn't want a bunch of tourists going out there and getting lost trying to find it and then running into trouble themselves, because this is supposedly, at least the Utah one, was supposedly in a very, very remote area. So they didn't tell you where exactly it was. But I'll tell you what, it doesn't take long for the young guns of the internet to find things if you give them any kind of clues. And they found it right away, supposedly, and determined how long it had been there already.
It definitely is it's a fun story. It really is. But I still think I think that the one in Utah is an art piece somebody put there, just hoping somebody would find it one day. And the one in Romania, I think, is just a copycat.
Well, I don't think so. Because obviously, well, it could be a copycat of something that they knew was there in Utah. But the fact that this thing either appeared in Romania or was discovered in Romania only a day before the thing disappeared in Utah means that there's a coordinated effort there somehow. If indeed they're the same design on the object.
What were you saying about the design? Do you think they're different though? They don't look the same from the photos?
Yeah, my confusion, even with the Utah one, was I don't know if you saw that film crew that went out on the 27th, the day after Thanksgiving, and showed video of a triangular shape hole in the ground where supposedly this monolith came from. That confused me a bit. And this triangular hole in the ground was recessed enough with a flange, a metal flange around it that went into the bedrock, supposedly, for a ways. So I always thought when you looked at that thing from the camera angles that they gave us initially that it was rectangular, the object. So I don't know how that corresponds with a triangular base.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's, I don't know, a sculpture graffiti. Yeah. I like how it was illegally placed.
It was either very well done or very resilient. If indeed it's been there for a few years, the thing looked pretty pristine.
Well, I got nothing else on it personally. I think it's a fun thing. Somebody who's bored. It's not a crop circle. Still took some effort. I'm just thinking about how you had to brush out. I guess you could do it with chains and stuff, but brushing out your path in and out, setting it up and getting out of there in a truck or whatever, or hiking out, you'd have to clear the footprints and everything. And it wasn't a small effort to get it out there. So good for them.
Yeah, well, indeed, if it was done around 2015, plenty of erosion would have happened as far as any footprints out to the area. And if they were careful at all, they could backtrack a little bit and then the wind would take care of the rest, I would imagine, over the ensuing years.
Well, it's there. And, in I guess other news, we have that 8 miles. What?
I said it was there.
Yeah. Well, so I guess somebody would have to see the piece fast or close enough to identify it or label it, or, at least photograph it enough extensively to say, hey, this is the same one. So I guess you either have a copycat or you have somebody passing this thing around. And okay, so it's going to have to be somewhere. I guess there's no pattern predictability yet. I don't think.
Right.
Why Romania? It's going to have to make a third point or a fourth point, or if you're going to make 6 points in space. If it's going to be, if we're going to make a Stargate-like point of origin to unlock the gate here, then it's going to have to move multiple times to figure out a point of origin slash. I don't know what do we do with this? It's going to have to keep appearing and disappearing, and someone's going to have to see the same piece enough times to say, yeah, this actually is the same piece. It has moved around more than one country, and it's done it in a very short amount of time. And I guess it's one more thing to get you off your sofa.
Yeah, gives you something to do when you're hunkered down at home and can't go anywhere. It's a convenient distraction. Let's put it that way.
That used to be called bars, restaurants, my personal liberties and businesses. They could have left all the bears alone, but nope. Here we are.
All right, Jared. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about that new discovery down in the rainforest. That giant wall. That's incredible. Can you tell us about that, Jared?
Okay, yeah, that's a good squirrel. Good distraction. 8 miles of newly found pictographs, including animals that have been extinct for, fauna. They are saying that it's at least 12,000 years old, could be 17,000 years old. So we're talking pre-flood. And we're talking pictures of extinct species, including mammoths, and 8 miles long on a cliffside that you can walk up to, and at least from the photos, like we're talking 30, 40, 50 feet, above 5 stories worth of drawings that no one noticed.
So how could you have a 6-mile long wall of drawings that nobody notices? Is that even possible?
Well, they're still finding, we could Google this quick, but they keep finding pictographs in Peru for the Nazca lines. They didn't. You have, there's the German researcher that lived there into her 90s. She researched the Nazca lines for 50 years. And I think there was a huge news story a couple of years ago. They found 30 giant, literally you can see them from the sky. There's tourist flights daily, so you can go fly over the Nazca lines and see them. This is a thing. People pay for this. And then, of course, the pilots, they have established routes, but they look to take tourist places so people fly over them. And they're still finding giant, pictographs in the ground from airplanes. So they're not even fully explored. That says something. And they found 33 of them just, I think, 2 years ago. And then recently they just found another one. I think it was shaped like a dog or a squirrel or a cat or something. And so if you have a jungle, heavy jungle area, or maybe it's been occupied by other political factions or some pharmaceutical gentlemen, there is a good chance that it might have been an area that just couldn't have been explored, which is frequently the case, like in the Congo in Africa. That has been the least and last explored areas of Africa, and it's made its way into some very important books, including Sex at Dawn and a number of other anthropological studies, because the monkeys and the fauna and the things that are in the Congo are very, very unique also. And because it's been such a center for discourse and civil war, it hasn't been a place that's been safe for researchers. Same thing goes with the Eye of Africa. That could be a very legit location for, I'm so sorry, I'm going to say this, Atlantis, but the actual city of, not the entire term now that we're kind of coining possibly for an ancient lost advanced human race. But the Eye of Africa is in a country that is that upper north western area of Africa is, again, it's not a safe area. It's not easy to study. You can't stay there safely. So these areas like this pictographs on these walls, they just don't get looked at for years or ever, or the people who are in that area are likely doing business that it's not their desire to have more people come to that area, including antiquities theft. There's a lot of illegal digging, and maybe they're hoping the people who have found it locally, they could be people who are either trying to protect the site or people trying to take advantage of it being there and then in turn digging and looking for burials that they can find something.
Yeah, and you're saying it's 6 miles long. How many? 8 miles long. How many people would it take to do something like that over how long a time?
Oh, I'd love to get Michael's opinion on that, because it just, you look at what they drew and you got to wonder, did they do it continuously? Did they just show up every day and they added new stories? Or was it the place that you went to ritual? This is the time I will use ritual. And I know I'm a big critic of everything's a church and everything's a temple and sacred, but this looks like a place where you went and you added something significant. And so was it done annually? Was it done every month? Because what I was trying to discern from some of the lower level, the bleed outs on some of the lower levels where you could reach, it looks like it has multiple layers of drawings. So we're seeing a red pigment on this stone, but I don't know if the entire thing was done in a red pigment. It could be that it's oxidized and it was actually other colors than red, but we don't, it's recently discovered. They just photographed it. They at least released it, so they could have been looking at it for a few months, but I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah. Whenever I hear the idea of pictographs on a wall or a rock that's protruding upwards, I think to myself, the summer and winter solstices, because indeed, before cable television, literally, sometimes indigenous tribes would use the shadows, the protrusions from the sun on walls to tell stories. And literally, if indeed there were certain times of the year that they would carve or paint things onto walls that were eventually hit by the sunlight at certain seasons, those things meant a lot to those cultures. It was almost as if, every year or every decade or so, they would update the stories, their oral traditions or whatever.
Yeah.
And tell them in those kinds of formats. So I always wonder about those things.
This kind of a wall, also at 8 miles long and as tall as it is, this is not a society that's leaving that area. Not for a significant amount of time. And even if you were just really thinking, hey, we just got to label up this wall before we move on, that's just incredibly serious graffiti. It doesn't look like the high school class of 17,000 BC just went to town for a senior prank. It just doesn't.
And what you're telling me on this thing is that there are different levels of artwork on this wall. In other words, how high. It's not all in a certain location where someone standing next to the wall could do it. I'm assuming there's stuff way up there on the wall.
Oh, check it out! I'm going to send it to you right now. This is worth looking at together, because here's ancient origins thing on it. I'll send you. I think it's worth starting with their article.
Here we go.
And then. Let's see. There's another one though that you were. Let's see. It was at.
Oh no, this is an amphitheater. This is before drive-in movies. That's huge. It goes way up the side of this rock wall,
Yeah, and
and
it's 8 miles
if you'll
long.
notice, if you'll notice, it is kind of organized. It's not just willy-nilly images. That looks as if you could actually tell a story from here. By if you were giving a PowerPoint demonstration standing in front of this wall, you would point with a laser pointer to each one of these things in a row and tell a story. I really love this. That's interesting. And this is Ice Age Colombian art found painted in remote jungle cliffs. Tens of thousands of paintings of people, giant extinct animals, psychedelic plants from 12,500 years ago have been discovered on remote cliffs in Colombia. The rare collection of Ice Age Colombian art has been discovered in the Amazon region of Colombia in 2019. The prehistoric Colombian art of this area is one of the world's largest collections of rock art ever discovered. I'll just quit there for right now, unless we want to go any further with any details. But oh my goodness, this is very unusual.
I know.
I'm gonna see if I can click this picture to make it larger. Sometimes my yeah, there you go. It's a little bit larger. Oh, by the way, if you guys would like, and you've got a separate device like your phone, you can always go to Michael W. Hall on Facebook, and you can see what I'm showing. So people will be able to, we can talk about the same thing as you like.
So I just sent you another one quick if you want to look. It's archaeologists have discovered, it's the it looks like the artnet.com news. If you look at the messages, just the last one I sent,
Yep.
I think there's an image in there that the very first, it's quite an interesting group of people. Okay,
I am now bringing it up on the screen. Oh my word. This is great. Let's see if I can make it even larger on the screen and get rid of some of the advertisements on the side. But okay, I can't really get it any larger, but I don't know if you can see this if you go to Facebook. But literally, there is a very tall being standing next to a very short being, standing next to a very medium-sized being, and another smaller medium-sized being, and then another smaller being. They look humanoid. They've got 2 legs, 2 arms. Some interesting headdresses.
They look very unusual, don't they, for the area?
Yeah, they don't look like they're depicting a normal indigenous tribal member.
Okay, you'll have to entertain me. I sent you one more article. You got to open it up because it shows you the perspective, and I think it's, we're not going to see 8 miles long of it, but I think you need to see at least where they've gotten with the size. That there's a side view in the next article that I sent, the Independent.
Okay.
From United Kingdom, prehistoric rock art discovered. They call it the Sistine Chapel of rock art. But
oh yeah.
What I like about it is you got the photographers there, and then further down, though, it gives another solid perspective of a series of archaeologists, 5 of them standing together, and it's looking up. And if you can look at that photo, I think it's a great photo because it gives you the height.
Okay, I'm trying to find out where you just sent this last one because it's
Skype.
Skype. Okay, good. Hang on.
Yeah, Right, right there. I think it's worth looking at for everybody. There's new finds like this while you're pulling it up. I guess all I have to say is that there is clearly, for anyone who's wanting to either do archaeology or do this kind of exploration, I just don't think that there's anything off the table, whether it's literally a geoglyph. I mean, these are glyphs on the side of a wall, the quantity of them. Clearly, there's a lot of, you get out of a gully or you get out of a valley. I was in South Africa for January, and while I was doing research, I mean, some of the cliffs are a couple thousand or 1,000 feet and 500 feet. And there's great climbing in this area. And from a distance, you can see vast amounts of wall. But when you get down in the valleys or when you get a little bit closer, the trees kind of swallow up. Despite the height of the sides of these cliffs, you just literally, it gets muted and you get into it, you don't see it, it's not there if you're not in a plane, and then if you're not looking for it, if you're not flying low enough. I think there's a lot of weird circumstances that pull together that make a site like this unavoidably lost. Or a lot of times I know lots of archaeologists talk about how there's absolutely no desire by local traditional people, native peoples, no matter where they are, they don't frequently talk to outsiders, let alone Westerners, let alone archaeologists, because they don't respect the culture. So they're not going to share the deepest or the most interesting points of their culture or society. And if this was a sacred place for them, if this is something that was valuable to a local, even based on, because some of the articles I've read here are saying it's 12 and a half to over 17,000 years old. And of that, obviously, dynastic peoples, Mayans, whatever, the multitude of what we think are established Central and South American peoples could have been involved in this space where they've adapted it, and it's even older, obviously, from societies even before that. Maybe in 8 miles, maybe the first 2 miles of this wall are going to be found out to be, and maybe it wasn't lineal. I'm not even assuming that they started at one and moved to the other. They could have had stations, kind of a Catholic Stations of the Cross. That Yep. This is where it could have been filled in then over time, over different people knew that it was an important place and it adapted different meanings. And this is where I think it's so important to not jump to conclusions about what this could be, because it's the height, it's the width, and it doesn't have a left to right read or an up and down read, or we can't make that assumption.
Yeah, you're right. This is a very impressive photograph, the last one you sent me, of an obtuse view of the wall as you're looking down there. You can see the size of the gentleman at the bottom of the wall, looking at the wall, so you get an idea how massive. And you can see that there are literally carving or paintings that are up much higher than a person could reach. Let me just read what it says here. An 8-mile wall of prehistoric rock art featuring animals, humans, has been discovered in the Chirabiquete National Park, Colombia, in the Amazon rainforest, dubbed the Sistine Chapel of the Ancients. I love that. The 12,500 years old artwork was uncovered by a British Colombian team of archaeologists under the leadership of Jose Iriarte, professor of archaeology at Exeter University, and was funded by the European Research Council. Experts dated the rock art based on the portrayal of animals that are now extinct, such as a mastodon, a prehistoric relative of the elephant, known to have inhabited North and Central America about 12,000 years ago. Among other animals portrayed in the rock art are fish, turtles, lizards, birds, and people dancing and holding hands, reported the Observer. Although the discovery was made about a year ago, the drawings were first unveiled for upcoming documentary series of Channel 4 Jungle Mystery, Lost Kingdom of the Amazon. The series is scheduled to hit the screens on December 5th. Hey, we got to look for that one. That would be very interesting to see the documentary on this thing.
It's pretty cool. It's again, we can't make assumptions that we know every creature. That I mean, there's so many pictographs. It's what is there any language? Are they showing any cultures? I mean, we have those giant Olmec and Toltecs, the Olmec heads, the giant heads, these megalithic giant Central African-looking people that should not be in Central and South America. We have stone spheres, all the megalithic structures throughout Central and South America, the new LiDAR scans from Guatemala and all the areas that they're doing right now. You know, when you look at this, there's always this assumption of a lineal progression, that this group is a prior group that led into some of those later cultures. The reality is this could be an ongoing and continuous group that lived alongside a more advanced group that didn't correspond or have anything to do with megalithic structures from Tiwanaku down to, you know, what have you. And early archaeologists in the 1900s and late 1800s, one of the things they found were shell pyramids. They were made out of shells, just little shells that you find on the beach. And it's quite the mystery because the size, I mean, tens of millions of shells. We're not talking like a small mound. We're talking really, 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 really big piles. So there's always been groups of people that have lived alongside more advanced. And when you have 8 miles of rock art, and if it does look like the same, again, could be mimicked, but if you have the same group living in an area alongside more advanced peoples, I think it says a lot about the positioning, the geo-positioning of what direction do we then turn around from this pictograph and say, okay, over here, they were living within 10 miles, 5 miles, 100 miles. They were isolated away from a more advanced pyramid, megalithic structured society. And this wall is, I think, 8 miles long is significant because it points to either their potential isolation or that proximity to a more advanced society. I think it's pretty exciting.
Now, why do you think they're coming out with this information now, Jared? Do you think they found this wall a while ago and this stuff is just now coming out? Does this prove that archaeology is changing?
I think that there's a lot of younger archaeologists now. There are people who are just not afraid to say what they think. I think it is evolving in general, but I also think that there are just as many archaeologists that, you know, in order to be funded I don't know the career path of any of the archaeologists involved in this project, right? So I'm saying that up front. I don't know any of them. And different archaeologists, depending on their career path, depending on their ability to be funded for a project, this is a case of whoever discovered it either made them, as in who's ever getting credit for this. So this is a PR campaign where you have someone who is obviously, if they're at the beginning of their career, well, this is going to get them funding to do further work and to do other work. They're going to get funding, which is going to pay their bills, which is going to keep them in their field. And then on the other hand, it could be, this is another great discovery I've done, and you should still fund me on my next dig to Egypt. Or we're going to do a LiDAR scan and look for lost cities in this area. I mean, it could be, again, it could be a starter thing. It could be I'm continuing my career thing. But the goal of going public with stuff like this is really driving that necessity to PR for your funding. You have to bring it up.
Yeah, there goes a train. Hey,
yeah, it was a shorty.
Do you think that there's the lost city of gold out there yet to be discovered?
I think that ties into a million different conspiracies. I want Michael's opinion on that.
You know, I don't know. Well, the short answer would be, why not? You know, if they've just found a rock wall like this with a whole lot of interesting artwork, and it's been there for thousands of years, what's saying that there isn't a hidden city, whether it's on top of the earth or under the earth, that's been hoarding, riches for eons? Who knows? You always want to think about that and the idea that that's a possibility. But of course, this rock art here is just fascinating to me because I haven't heard anything yet. And of course, we wouldn't necessarily, in an 8-mile long wall, be shown the really controversial drawings. We're being shown stuff they want us to see. I would be interested to see if there's any UFOs, flying saucers, alien heads and stuff depicted on this wall as well.
Okay, that did cross my mind. I'm always, people are always looking for this contact with aliens or extraterrestrials. The issue is all over the earth, native peoples live near more advanced societies, or even if they're remote, they see planes, they see things that are not of their culture. So at this time period, every pictograph we can find where somebody's like, the guy in the spacesuit, I'm, or what appears to be a spacesuit or a diving suit or a modern boat, something that doesn't make sense to them, but they did get on a wall somewhere. And I know it's real popular to draw a buffalo and a bison and a mammoth and things that you get to eat and maybe takes care of everybody for 2-3 months at a shot. But I think it is going to be interesting. In these pictographs, there's got to be, even in the drawing, the first one, and I'm glad you did the description of it, where you got the people kneeling or standing there. And the interesting thing is the hair bun. What society does it represent? Do the stripes even mean anything for as simply as they designed it? Or is the design of the clothing, does it indicate trade with Asia or trade with Europe? Trade with North or South America? Does it indicate or show any pattern to a society that isn't on that, even in those groupings? And so if there is a drawing that's showing devices or people or in costume or what they think is decorative, is it showing something that points to those other peoples? And we haven't clearly found enough. Like that there's just the stuff that keeps being found in Europe, 40,000 years old, 35,000 years old. And there's these pictographs, again, showing, here we are, 8 miles of a wall, showing things that are extinct. And yet Max Uhle, the father of South American archaeology, they found there were definitely fire pits found in Argentina, in other places in South America, that showed that somebody was still hunting mammoth. And they were like, well, that shouldn't have overlapped with the Clovis people. That would just not fly with the land bridge theory, which I think younger archaeologists, Michael, that you're talking about, I think the Clovis idea is finally completely collapsing as far as just brushing off the idea that everything in North and then therefore South America happened because there was a land bridge, and that's it all gets triggered post Younger Dryas, and then they made their way down to South America through Central America, and they got busy as beavers, and they just built all this stuff, and they did it in the last 6,000 years.
Right.
So I think that this is a great wall because I would love to pore over it. I wish, when they do finds like this, and they, it's kind of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, where it wasn't intentional that it was going to be released to the public. It's another great archaeological example of there wasn't standards for many years. And I included this in my book about Dr. Melissa Sellu. She is an expert in Coptic Christian. She knows a lot about ancient peoples and in Egypt, and holds a number of different degrees, including Harvard. Her alma mater is Macalester College, and I only bring it up because a huge impact on me was a lecture she did on antiquity theft and it was covering Egypt, and it was covering, different examples. And one of the examples she had was a professor that she said, look, I'm not going to name him, but out of his own amusement and pleasure, he had an original Dead Sea Scroll in his desk for 40 years because he could. And that to me is, and then of course the lecture went on, and I do talk about it in my book. And the thing is, the lecture goes on, and her point is that yes, there are triggers in place now, and the triggers are somebody goes through all the effort to find these things. The rule is now that you find something, the agreement's supposed to be that it's your exclusive little baby to kind of toy around with for 5 years. And then whatever it is, you're supposed to be able to open it up to other serious researchers. But I think that the argument should be all along that an archaeologist should be able to be paid regardless of the length of time from the date they find the find, because I think all of us have genetic memory. All of us have an ability to look at these things and all the three of us talking right now have different genetic memory triggers. And even though it's not an area that you're an expert in or not, or are, it's the same thing as just putting three different people in front of a piece of art. They're all going to have a different experience. And this is a history that's written on a wall in a place that, just like a Dead Sea Scroll, it could trigger some other people's memories. And I think having a digitized, like the news article should come out and somebody should get a pat on the back, but the funding for the archaeologists doing the work should be funded irregardless. There should be super funds for this. There should be private donors. God knows the tech world could. But besides that, the general citizen archaeologist, I think in this case, and everybody listening, should have a look at it. We should be able to go online and have a central depository where if you've been doing nothing but looking at pictographs all around the world, you might see something out of 8 miles. I can't even fathom how long it would take to look at each one and really kind of study it, because it sure looks like on those lower photos, Michael, that they've totally gone over layer after layer after layer. So maybe the younger kids or maybe the lower level was kind of like, hey, you kids do what you want here, but the rest of it's the adult stuff. Or it just got bled or whatever. But as far as the images bled together with the staining and the general weather, but it looks like there's a lot of different layers of drawings and or carvings. So we're not obviously with the naked eye without UV. There's been a lot of different ways and techniques, that they've used to make the pigments express themselves. So we're seeing one color, we're seeing one set of images. There could be scrapings that actually are full-on carvings and also colors that might be very vibrant once they're put under different UV light. And then imagine if we could just all get online and be able to take a look at these images. And for someone who's spending more time with them, what if one of these images matches one in a completely different area? Like, what if one of these lined up with something in Australia with Aboriginal art? What if one of these lined up with what they've been finding in Western Siberia, like the wood statue that's 22 feet tall? What if it has a carving that absolutely 100% has a symbol and carving that matches something that's 40, 50, 60, 80,000 years old? And those are things where when you don't hide the Dead Sea Scroll in your desk drawer, and initially my example was the Dead Sea Scrolls in general, because people take it for granted that, oh, that's public property, but that's not what happened. They were sent as a backup by the Israeli government to California. There was a curator in America, and I'm sorry, I don't have the curator's name, but they let out the digitized copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and that person lost their job. And the reality is that it was never meant for it to be released to the general public the way it was. But what came of it, and what I found really interesting in the lecture with Dr. Melissa Sello, was that it was the cumulative eyes on the research, on the raw documentation, so much work got done because it was released and not kept to just a few researchers. And you could almost argue that years and years of work were advanced on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I think every single archaeological site around the world could have the same effect if they weren't, hoarding it. And it would just be really exciting to see more of these pictographs, because I bet Michael could have, I bet there's 50 shows on how eerily foreign and extraterrestrial some of those pictographs probably look in 8 miles.
Could you imagine, Jared, what would happen if everybody saw this on their wall as much as they were seeing that stupid monolith?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think the monologue was the monologue. That monolith, it was a perfect kickoff because there's a dialogue about it. It's social. It's out there. It's like social media in general. It's a fun, stress relieving, sometimes observation, and it's clearly something that somebody did, and the human race needs a break and a joke and a laugh or just a mental puzzle every now and then. And so that was a fun lead in. And then here's this epic find of 8 miles long. And, obviously, have they already gotten up there? It's not like you throw a ladder against that wall. So it's high definition drone footage. I mean, it's super lenses and doing close-ups, and then again, the problem is a lot of those pictographs, that wall, you're going to have to look at it with UV and other spectrums. It's not just UV. You have to look at it and using other methodologies that are going to reveal the layers of imaging, just like under, a lot of great artists painted on canvases twice or 3 or 4 or 5 times. And seeing the under images are going to also really reveal a lot more about who is there. And then what about charcoal remains, campfires? I mean, if you got extinct animals in those pictographs, how many campfires and how many, what the remnants and foundations of maybe only LiDAR scannable or satellite imaging available pictures are going to reveal that these people didn't live far from this, and or if they did find any of the fire pits or cooking areas, what if they find mastodon and woolly mammoth type saber tooth, things that were not supposed to be coexisting with Neolithic hunters or whatever they're
or a dinosaur.
Claim. Yeah, we have the Younger Dryas event, which is the biblical, what we think maybe is the biblical flood, and then North America loses the camel. We had the camel first. That was in North America. We had a giant bear that got wiped out. We had, I believe, cheetahs or leopards.
The saber tooth, yeah.
Yeah, we had a few things that just all of it just immediately stopped at this cataclysmic event. And so if you have 8 miles of pictographs, that says a lot, I think, about the society and its sustainability over a long period of time, even if it was just a few generations and they were painting every day. Don't you think that was a lot of work, Michael?
Yeah, this looks like I said, a public gathering place as well. You sure would not go there as an artist or maybe a few artists from the tribe and just kind of hang out there and do 8 miles worth of this stuff without probably anticipating you're going to have a big crowd at one point that gets to watch this or, talk about it, that kind of thing. This looks to me to be a kind of, one of those things you would do for a crowd of folks.
Yeah, it could have been interactive. What about, you light the fire below and maybe the images seem to dance a little.
Yeah.
Or move. Or you're, again, same concept, I guess, really long torch. on a pole. We're making an assumption that, it's just a static gallery that you're just walking up and looking at it. We have no idea what the use of this space would be for a society. Or is it collective? Is this just collective, their library for mankind? Is it basically their Library of Congress?
Yeah,
right.
Another question we can ask too is, I know that they discovered this wall, but what were they doing out there? What were they really looking for?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah. And indeed, to be this massive and this involved in a certain area kind of begs the question of there must have been quite a lot of folks there in this area. I can't imagine that this was only a small tribe of 50 people that did this massive fresco.
Yeah,
Well,
they have to eat, they have to hunt, they have to grow things. They just can't put all of their time into painting this wall.
no, not to mention what is the dye, and again, we're only seeing some. I some of these colors last longer than others, or some of them will remain or survive. We can't make any assumption about what it is that they, if they were using different colors. We can't even assume that we're seeing the complete remnants. There are, again, faded images, the types of products that they were crushing or putting together to actually put this on. I'm very curious what those chemicals are going to turn out to be. And again, how far away were they getting them from? What's the equivalent of paint on that wall? How much Sherwin-Williams were they buying?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And you'll notice, I'm noticing on this thing too, is that, the rock art that you see in those caves in France that were just very artistic, very well done, almost masterpieces in themselves in construction. These are not that. These are just primitive drawings of some kind telling a story, is what it looks to me, rather than just being artwork to impress somebody on their skill. There's not a lot of skill here as far as I can see, but who knows? We haven't seen it all.
Yeah,
We'll never see it all.
Well, it would be great. I don't know where it is as far as safety goes. It's always, obviously they have a news crew there. They've brought people in. It's obviously a popular find. But the question is it, is it safe for the general public? Obviously, it's not set up it's not about tourism. It's just about any researcher that is interested. Is it even realistic that they can head over there and take a look in a safe manner? And then, of course, I'm always going to start asking about, I'm looking for those buildings, those foundations. I'm looking for if it was a more settled, domesticated, simpler culture. Were they using terra preta, engineered soil? Were they sitting on an area that was already used by an older society in the 20 or 30 or 40 or 50,000 year range? The reality is that we have to stop looking at part of the changing the narrative. Instead of saying the conspiracy or this is the mainstream academic, I guess I'm just going to start going with, let's just look at changing the narrative for the idea that, one, that there was a lineal progression of humans that all were at one level and then eventually got to a different kind of level. Part of changing that narrative is to not assume that anyone in South America, Central America, North America came from a land bridge via the mysterious Clovis people, but that there was peoples being, we know earliest paleoanthropologists and archaeologists knew that the Asian coast, that the Chinese, Polynesians absolutely had contact with South and Central America, that they knew that, and it got dropped from the narrative. And then we know that there's Roman galleons off the coast of Brazil. That's in multiple news stories. I talk about it in my book. And so we know that we know that the Phoenicians, we know that the Celts, we know that the Egyptians, we know that there's a lot of people that have all made it in North America, besides the Vikings. But so that we know that this area was populated post Younger Dryas. But what we're talking about is, if you don't assume that people came across a land bridge in the last 12,000 years or 13,000 years, or they did, and they were just still all banging rocks together, we have to look at this exact wall, combined with the other data we have from giant megalithic constructions all through Central and South America. And instead of assuming we know their origin, we need to just start looking at simple peoples. This is a long story, sorry, folks, to get to. I think that when you have a simpler group of humans, where are they in proximity to the large megalithic builders and the stone spheres and the engineered soil? And if they're on top of, this is where it gets exciting, it's not as boring as it sounds, is that if we have an engineered soil like Terra Preta, and a simpler society has moved in, and the Terra Preta is 20 feet thick because it was adapted by a survivor culture, like a dynastic people that came after. So we have as in a global advanced ancient human civilization that falls cataclysmically or through weaponized disaster and war, but they retreat or they fall apart or they don't occupy these areas. And then what we have is different dynastic or survivor people after the Younger Dryas and other catastrophes moving into areas where they take over, they adapt, they apparently have time to do 8 miles of pictographs and writing. But here's another window of a clearly larger society, I think, established in an area for a longer period of time. And the finds, you find what you're looking for. If you want to find, oh, this is their first fire pit, well, look under the fire pit. Is there Terra Preta? Is there an engineered soil? How deep does it go? How much does it extend in this area? And now we have a little tiny snapshot of, well, hey, it looks like these people have been here for 12 to 17,000 years, but it looks like they were using a soil that's even older than that. And there's no evidence at this point in the dirt that says it was them, but there's clearly been occupation even prior. Or that's what's exciting to me, is that instead of trying to piece this find into another archaeological find, you piece it into just where it is and these other facts that you can table. If they overlap on an older society, if they're using or reusing an engineered soil for their growing, if they're in an area and the LiDAR shows a larger, more megalithic, or if they show themselves to be contemporary with these, Mayans, Toltecs, Olmecs, Aztecs, the zillions of other indigenous peoples, is this a whole new group? And their proximity culturally and in the soil and in any ruins and fire pits is just, I think, really exciting. It's exciting. I will shut up now.
Yeah. Now let me ask you. I want to ask you a question, Jared. Do you think it's possible that South America, or even North America for that matter, because we know that there's so much that happened on the North American continent that's obviously covered up from Yellowstone per se. I mean, it's gone every 200,000 years, at least 5 times now. That's 1,000,000 years. Do you think it's possible that society, or that, I guess not society, but humanity, and there were beings that maybe it started here and not Babylon or Iraq per se?
Yeah, actually, I mentioned it. This is a good book reference day. Max, the father of South American archaeology, gives a few lectures at the turn of the century about, hey, here's a general history of archaeology. And one of the ones that he talks about, which I quoted in the book, was about there were some very serious archaeologists in Argentina that felt that, again, we're talking the Western world, and originally archaeology was to find art, and then eventually it became a religious quest. And for the Western hemisphere, that means proving out the biblical story, which means out of Africa. And so it was quite heretical to suggest that possibly anywhere else other than Africa. In fact, it's held even for atheists and for however you want to put it. People are just adamant that whatever the story is, well, it starts in Africa. But there were archaeologists even 120, 140 years ago that were finding sites, eoliths, very simple tools that it takes a heavy discernment to know that it's not just a rock, that it's been shaped to use as a tool. So these very, very early eoliths are sometimes they're just the way they've cleaved two pieces of rock, and it's not natural, and determining whether it is or not. But they early on determined that there were such ancient finds that the argument was made that the Garden of Eden, from a biblical, at least that was the narrative that they were looking at, was more of a South American story than it was a Central African story. And when you've been around and you find anatomically correct humans in millions of layers of earth, which they have and did, which is why we talked to Michael Cremo, and he's revisited those finds and published those in Forbidden Archaeology. The reason we look at all that is because the human story is much older than we tell ourselves. And so we don't know the origin of humankind. There's a lot of genetic information, and we could talk for hours about why the work that's being found, the most I'm going to say cutting edge work, is that the story of out of Africa is a foundational theory, but it's a theory, and the facts that are being found are contradicting that. And with as ancient as the human race is, it is very clearly being seen that South America, Central America, North America have sites that don't follow the existing narrative, and that means it has to be a different one. And that means you got to stop saying that your theories are facts, because here we go, we're finding peoples living extensively in an area that was supposed to be without population, or with very simple and not complex, a few thousand people, and nomadic and tribal. And this is not what we're seeing. I mean, these people this is a good example. This is an 8-mile wall of people that are clearly settled in. And here's the other thing. That's just one wall. What about large boulders or other walls? I mean, obviously this is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this can't be the only wall they wrote on. Just as a side note.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been just a wall that they let the kids draw on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. This is, I think, again, when you look at some of those pictures up close, and Michael's been scrolling through them, and the lowest level, I got to see a really good close-up, high-definition photograph, and the lowest levels, under 6 feet, clearly they seem to have been just scratched on over and over and over. And I think it would be even interesting to figure out if this culture that was using and writing on that wall, it takes some time to put up a ladder. I mean, you could argue, well, a really good tree trunk climber, people who take down coconuts and climb palm trees, they can go up a single shaft tree with just barefoot and a good hand grip, that they can do it not like a tree trimmer does with the spiked shoes, that you can actually get up a tree pretty easily. So you could argue that, maybe they cut whole logs down and use them as trees, but how did they get up there and do the work to begin with? I mean, what if it was scaffolding? Basically, it could be scaffolding. So that, and again, none of that would be left, but it's the logistics. I think I don't really think that you can determine 100% from the logistics, the mechanics of putting that much paint on the walls, but I do think it goes to the longevity of the site, clearly by people that were not going to leave it. And I just don't think that was something 50 people did. I don't think that, boy, it'd be one heck of a thing to find a family that likes art that much that, it was just 100 people who lived in this valley and they just couldn't stop drawing on the wall every day, in between hunting.
And
go for it.
I just want to let everybody know that the links to these photos will be in the description box below. So if you wanted to look at these photos, just click the link below and I'll put links there for these photos so that everybody can see if you're not watching on Michael's Facebook page. But Michael, I do want to move on, Jared. I know that's an exciting subject for you, but I want to move on to something else. And Michael, I wanted to ask you a question. I had a friend visit me recently from Russia, and I was talking to him about God and aliens, and what he told me was that a lot of people in Russia believe that all of the races here on the planet are really different species of aliens that have been deposited here to see how they get along, meaning the Chinese, African, white, Indian is different. And I don't know. Jared, maybe turn your mic down a second. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I don't know what that was. That was horrible.
Wait, you're not supposed to be able to hear me right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I am. Were you using a blow dryer or something?
That was another train, and I turned my audio off, so...
It didn't turn off. Did you hear the question, Michael?
Oh, yeah. No,
What do you think of that idea?
I think it has a lot of merit. Let's put it that way. The whole idea of the different races on the planet having just to do with geographic location, which is what, the anthropologists and, biologists will tell you, doesn't seem to really hold up when you get down to the bottom line here of, DNA and why we're a little bit different, in the different races around the planet. More likely to me, you would think that different visiting extraterrestrial races on the planet were coming to this world to go after its resources. And in different areas on the planet, they literally tweaked the human stock or the hominids on the planet to do their work for them, and probably did it in different ways, as far as I can see. We are very, very close to one another as far as DNA goes, but there definitely is some interesting differences as well. So you would think that if Sitchin is correct in the fact that, at least one race that he's talking about, the Anunnaki, created a race of worker bees, basically, to do their bidding in the mines, trying to get the gold from the earth, that other terrestrial races in different parts of the planet could have done the same thing.
All right, Jared, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, your mute button's really bad. Don't hit that again.
Yeah, apparently not. It's not even a mute. It's my hard line off this Scarlet, off the interface, and it
doesn't work.
That's the oddest thing. Because it shows that I don't have vocals. Okay, I guess it's still on. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
I don't know if it has to do with Skype or... Anyway, total digression. So...
What do you think of the idea of all of the different races of man on the planet are really different alien species, and we've all kind of been put here to kind of see how we all mingle together. Like maybe this entire planet is just an experiment, right?
Yeah, I can't. I was fascinated when I was young that different races just never made any sense ever. And I get the biblical story behind it. You know, we don't need to, it's not the Tower of Babel here. I just think that it is just such an odd duck thing that they're just the races. I theorized early on, and I didn't know how to talk about it in my book, because we have the elongated skulled Paracas people of Peru, and there are elongated skulled people in Europe and in Africa, and they've been found on every kind. We're not talking people have had boards pressed together. We're talking naturally born elongated skulled people, and it's just, despite it being talked about, it is still not studied. Right down to the blood types in Latin America and in North America, we have blood types that should not exist where they do. And then we have an unknown. So there's been a lot of conversations about Neanderthal and Denisovan and these other races, that there's this mystery. Even in mainstream academia, there was an article recently about mystery ancestor to the human race, or mystery genetic line. Well, we don't even know what the Paracas are. They literally are born the way they are, with their suture lines in their head being different than our skulls, their neck, their alignment with their skull and their body, their where the neck physically goes into the head. There's just clear indicators that the races on this planet have a much different, more expansive, and a very much untold and older story than we're telling, which is, by the way, we're creeping into the area as to why the out of Africa story is starting to go away. There was assumptions made about Denisovan, Neanderthal, and other genes. And there's a whole theory behind how moving out of Africa makes sense because of the genome, but we do not have a full genetic snapshot of every single pile of bones that we've found around the world. And there's this big elephant in the room with the Paracas. So I theorized in the book, I was just kind of considering, can I include, which I didn't, but it was, why the different races? Why was it speciality? Was it that it was one giant advanced human race? Like I say all the time, we go in for plastic surgery. If you're controlling waves and frequencies and measuring and understanding earthquakes and engineering soil and engineering creatures, how hard is it to change how you look to suit your function? How hard is it to be just a little more adapted to cold weather or a little more adapted to hot weather? The assumption is that, this is just a natural digression and development of just randomized isolating peoples, that eventually their genes just randomly expressed being Asian, or randomly expressed being from Africa, or randomly expressed being white. And I don't know. I don't think that's the case at all. We just don't. We haven't looked at everything we have available to us to look at. We have all these facts that we haven't looked at, and then at the same time, we have stories. We have a lot of legends and stories and mythologies about the origins of people. Yet we have the scientific tools, and we have the bodies, and we even have soft tissue, even from the Paracas, and there just isn't this big concerted effort to hey, we should look at this, and we have these blank spots in our genetic memory or in our code, and there's just this willingness to just gloss over it when we see it. It's there. These are facts, and we have to look at them, because there's just no rhyme nor reason unless you have a specific tooling to your genome to have the different variations in the human race. It has to be engineered. No going around it.
So let me ask you a question, Michael. Do you think that the Neanderthal are the original Earth beings, and that the Neanderthal were manipulated DNA wise by outer space beings, or do you think that even the Neanderthal were from somewhere else?
Oh yeah, I think the Neanderthal was probably tweaked, but tweaked from even an earlier stock. For instance, there's the race of people that were very small, even in Africa, or the Denisovans, I believe, were a lot smaller as well than and the Neanderthals have a much different bone structure and makeup, much more dense, kind of than the normal hominids and stuff. No, I think the Earth itself is plenty old enough to be able to have races that have developed. Maybe they were created. Maybe they didn't work out the way they thought they should, as far as the people who created them. Maybe they were even abandoned at one point, and or their landlords just left the planet after they got the gold and left them to their own devices, and some of them just died out. So we've got those dead ends, on the family tree, that kind of thing. But it just doesn't make any sense that evolution explains all of this.
Yeah, honestly, Jared, I want to drag you into this. I don't think evolution explains what happened to the Neanderthal. Do you have any idea what happened to the Neanderthal? Would it just disappear?
So it's interesting that they're admitting and showing and saying that there was clearly breeding going on between that species and our genome. It shows up. So does the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. Both the genetic codes show up in humans, and so the crossbreeding, at least from the snapshots of the successful decodings of those specific lines. And there does seem to be something. The magic number that shows up, at least in my research, is about 50,000 years ago. And now that, again, not to point fingers back to Cuba, but you have that city, that megalithic structure off the coast of Cuba at about 2,300 feet deep. And the last time that city could have been about, yes, there's a theory of hydrostatic plates, the plates that are the theory for tectonic earthquakes, is that there are different plates that are floating on the magma under the earth, and that's what causes earthquakes, when these plates rub or grab each other or fold or flip on each other. There's a reason for earthquakes. And so that there is this hypothetical that the water had gotten under the plates, and then that's how some of our dramatic changes in temperature or heights, where you have the Eye of Africa I mentioned earlier, ended up at about 8,000 feet above sea level. And then you have Lake Titicaca with salt water in it and seahorses, and that appears to have risen way high up. It's like 13,000 feet plus in the above sea level. And then you have this city off of Cuba that sunk 2,300 feet. So that's a hypothetical. But it looks like, based on what we do know of our current geological understanding of plate shifting, puts that city above ground, above water, about, again, 50,000 years ago is the earliest it could have been above. And so when we look at places like Doggerland in Europe, which is all the land that's sunk and was still above water even 6,000 years ago, and that puts us well within the reaches of Göbekli Tepe and all these other sites. So the reality is, Denisovan, Neanderthal, and humans 50,000 plus years ago, there are giant megalithic cities. And even from we have other archaeological sites. So table some facts, like everyone's talking about the Sphinx. We know that the Sphinx is very, very old. And there were numbers like 30, 40, 50,000 years ago thrown out. And some would say older. And that's hard for people to hear. So it's like a number that doesn't get spoken about as much. But picture a planet populated by a much more diverse set of humans that have nothing to do with evolution. They were either engineered intentionally by certain sets of humans or other people, and or you have, again, a worldwide megalithic building culture from what we see off of Cuba that existed for thousands or hundreds of years prior to the world going through such a dramatic shift that stuff that was at sea level ends up at 9 or 13,000 feet above or 2,300 feet deep below that was once above. And so why or how did those, some of the commentary about Neanderthals, they try to put them in loincloths, but they make them look kind of stupid or kind of slow. But yet then the commentary about Neanderthal was that they had a much larger brain, they were stronger, but then they give them a look that they barely could bang rocks together or that they could make simple tools. But we're making a gross assumption even about their functionality in brain capacity. We're making an assumption that they weren't as intelligent, or based on the few finds of the bodies we do have, we're making an assumption that we have a good, clear snapshot of their culture and that there weren't different groups within Neanderthal, that some lived simply, some lived on the beach. Others were much more advanced because they didn't want to live on the beach or they didn't want to live simply. It's the same thing now. If you deleted modern high-tech culture and assumed that the tribes that are on this planet are as advanced as we were, in 1,000 years or 3,000 or 5,000 or 8,000 years later, you can start making a much easier argument that the fire pit you found was the most advanced thing. That's it. And so I think it's a totally true statement that the more we find these different bones of these different groups of people, we need to be continuing the advance of DNA testing, soft tissue, even petrified tissues. I know chemically things have changed, but the processes we have even to measure that, we have optical stimulus luminescence, OSL, and there's a lot of different dating methods that are outside of the different multiple carbon formats now. We just need to keep working on that until we can keep building this larger genetic map. And right now we know for a fact we have a mysterious unknown. This is only because we've recently figured it out. We have an unknown human, not identified. There's definitely another human involved that we don't have a picture of, and yet we have the Paracas and these giant elongated skulls all over the planet, and we don't have, yes, Brian Forster did genetic testing, but there are a lot of these mummies, and some of them are 9,000 years old. Just the Paracas are naturally preserved that we know of, that they found. They were mummifying people naturally by accident for 9,000 years just in Peru. And we don't have any, we should have a line of genetic testing going on for ever. And we're not doing it. So it just makes me want to pull my hair out.
So, Michael, I guess we're just about out of time, guys. But Michael, I want to ask you a question. Everything that we've discovered, and everything that you see with human civilizations, obviously are coming and going. Do you think we are reaching the precipice of our civilization?
Precipice meaning not pinnacle, but precipice. I think you're probably right there. I think indeed there is a point on. Here's an interesting theory to keep in mind. If indeed there is life in the universe other than on just one planet like Earth, at one point, when the inhabitants of any planet realize that they're not alone in the universe, there's got to be a historic time on that planet. I think we are at that point right now on our planet. I think indeed the consciousness, the group consciousness of the planet, is ascending to the spot where they can't keep those secrets under wraps any longer. Of course, there's always been dripping disclosure, but indeed, I think as a race of Homo sapiens sapiens on a planet, our consciousness level is kind of like getting to that 100th monkey level where everybody is literally helping each other wake up. So that time frame, I think, is what we're in right now. I don't know if you would call it a precipice. It's definitely not a pinnacle, I wouldn't think. But indeed, at one point, that is when we get confirmation that we are not alone in the universe. And that is going to be a massive change in the psyche of all humans on the planet.
So what do you think about the Project Blue Beam and the whole idea that the government or the deep state is going to put forward a false flag alien attack, and they're going to do it with, I guess, holograms and things that we'll all be able to see in the sky, but it's all not real. What do you think of that theory?
Well, it all goes to the control of the masses. Indeed, they need to, as Werner von Braun mentioned, all the various false flags that will be attempted to keep people in fear and keep us militarized so that they will be able to control the spin when the disclosure actually happens. So that's why you hear the evil alien, agenda out there from some of the black hats in the military. You've got black hats, gray hats, and white hats in the deep state and the military that are warring it out right now as we speak.
Oh, yeah, it's really heating up from what I understand. In Frankfurt, there's a huge firefight there going on. Lots of interesting stuff. If you're not paying attention to the whole cabal versus alliance thing, you might want to start looking into that, because that's a lot of interesting stuff happening on that front.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely.
Jared, do you have anything else to ask Michael before we let him go for the night?
Well, have you seen anything new as far as this week, or what's your most interesting UFO and any encounters, any reports that have stood out?
I'm glad you asked. I'll tell you what, I don't know if you've had your ear to the rail on the UFO community, but there is a massive rumor out there that within a week, maybe even this week, there's going to be another major revelation. Let's call it confirmation of some kind of extraterrestrial disclosure. The New York Times, of course, kind of started this whole process December 16th of 2017. Then, of course, the gun camera footage from the Tic Tac and the Air Force, as far as confirming the UFOs exist and that they're not ours. And then, of course, Eric Davis recently came out this last summer and confirmed that he has been having high-level classified briefings with the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the Senate Intelligence Committee, confirming with them that we are in possession of extraterrestrial craft that are not made on this earth, not made by human hands. The rumor is that there could be a follow-up to the Admiral Wilson smoking gun memo of the century, and some kind of an announcement coming out in the next few days. I don't know if it's going to be as earth-shattering as some of the original disclosures or confirmations, but that's what we're hearing.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty damn exciting. What else do you say to that?
And that'd be awesome to see. Hopefully it happens.
My client, Grant Cameron, has told me he's heard this. Various other researchers out there, Richard Dolan, those kinds of folks have talked about it. You'll even hear UFO Jesus give his take on this thing. These are like young guns out there that are doing all the research online. So, yeah, it's very exciting. And who knows how 2020 could get any weirder, but it could happen.
Well, Jared, didn't I send you a story earlier about how there was a non-natural object on a path towards Earth right now?
Yeah, at least one that they're willing to disclose.
Yeah, they actually said that they thought it was a meteor, but they've been looking at this thing, and they say it's not a meteor, it's unnatural, and it's actually headed towards us. I think December 12th or something is supposed to get here.
About 13,000 miles away. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So it's going to swing by.
Yep. Well,
Michael, any thoughts on it? What do you think?
Yeah, I have a feeling from what I read on this thing that it could be a man-made object.
You think it's that rocket booster or something?
Yeah, right. From the Voyager 2 that basically kind of ran around the moon for a while, fell out of orbit there. Now it's kind of getting closer to us, and then eventually, once it falls out of our orbit, it's supposedly going to head on its way to the sun and probably be eaten up eventually. But I guess the forensics that they've done on this thing doesn't seem to say that it's anywhere near what an asteroid would behave like. But when they reverse engineered the flight path, they're thinking it came awfully close to the Voyager 2 booster rocket that sent Voyager 2 out of our local solar system. So who knows what it is, but it's always exciting. And of course, this was one of Wernher von Braun's false flags that he mentioned as well, is that they're going to use asteroids to scare people as well. So it's kind of part of the story, the scenario that they usually use just to keep people in fear. I don't think we have much to fear about this object.
Well, Wernher von Braun might have been right about that, but I mean, it's only a matter of time before we get hit by another asteroid, right?
Oh yeah, happens all the time in a small version. So yeah, a big one could be another Tunguska.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time before we get hit again.
Of course.
I mean, look at the moon; it's peppered.
Look at the Earth. We're peppered too.
Lightly peppered, I hope, for the future, but
yeah,
put the pepper cracker down on the fine setting, please.
Was that a train, Jared?
Yeah, that was another train. So I didn't even bother to mute it because I thought it would just show up. But
yeah, muting is definitely bad. Don't do that again.
I will not. So I didn't do it. I just let it go. It was another couple engines going by.
All right.
I love it. I'm a train freak, as you well know. I did the trip across the United States on the Empire Builder.
Oh, you did that trip? I wanted to do that trip.
Yeah, and I just love the sound. I love the ambiance. Where I live here in the suburb of Seattle up north, I live right on the waterfront. We have a train going by the waterfront all night long at various hours, and if the wind is right, you can hear it going by, and you can hear those rails as well.
Yeah, the first time I ever paddled a kayak was on the Puget Sound up there. I was staying on Bainbridge Island.
Oh yeah,
I love it up there. Beautiful.
Oh, it is. Thank you.
All right, Michael, you want to tell everybody where to find you? Jared, I'd imagine you're going to stick around for our outro. So, Michael, why don't you give us all your information, and we'll let you get out of here.
Well, thank you so much, you guys. It's been a real pleasure for me to hook up with you guys again and get caught up, especially at this specific time that we're living in right now. It's Michael W. Hall on Facebook. That's a real easy place to check me out. Of course, I've been the founder director of the UFO I-Team. You can find that on Facebook and YouTube as well. But yeah, anytime you need to get a hold of me, you can find me on Facebook.
Yeah, and you also do the Spaced Out Sundays, correct?
Yeah, every Sunday night, literally on Spreaker. We are on Spaced Out Radio, and my show on Sunday nights is called Spaced Out Sunday, from 9 p.m. to midnight Pacific Standard Time. Thanks for the plug.
Awesome, man. And we're going to go ahead and let you get out of here. Jared, you're going to stick around, and we'll be right back on Conflict Radio right after this. Welcome back to Conflict Radio. Jared, you're still with us, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. You want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on notaliens.com. There'll be a signed copy of my book there if you'd like to grab it, because I sign them for you and send them out. They're not pre-signed, so each one goes out uniquely to whomever would like. And if you want, you can find me on Amazon. You can just get the book there. It's a few dollars less, but it ships usually straight from wherever you're at and comes a little bit cheaper, but a few dollars more, you get a signed copy. Otherwise, I'm on YouTube at Not Aliens, and there will be a soon-to-be opened up member area where there'll be some exclusive archaeological content and interviews and podcasts and things that I'll be putting out on notaliens.com, and an audiobook coming out hopefully for Christmas.
Audiobook for Christmas?
That's the plan. You might not be able to get it or read it until like a week before, but it's happening.
You know, you certainly said that really fast. Do you find it easier to say now that you've said it probably 30 times?
Oh, yeah. So that's the point. Apparently working on the audiobook actually makes it happen. So now that I'm actually working on the audiobook, it's real easy to talk, but it's the part where you have to go back and edit the words. It's a heck of a lot harder than doing a Word doc. I did not realize that.
I'm going to go ahead and call you out on the show here. So if you need me to erase all this and start over, we can do that. But I do want to call you out. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I know that you have the coronavirus. And I want you to kind of tell everybody how you're doing, what the symptoms are like for you, and how long you've had it, what's going on. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I really just wanted to mess with everybody right there and start out with the iron lung comment, but I'm not going to. So I and my girlfriend, so here's what's interesting. I came down with it. We both got sick at the same time. She was tested. I was not, and that was after about 9 days, and she tested negative. That was from one of the state testing locations, and Minnesota's quite the testing state, lots of locations to go get a free test. Her test came back negative. I lost my sense of smell and taste, which is, according to the studies, associated with, believe it or not, the more mild forms of the condition of this cold, which is what it is. But I lost my taste, I lost my smell, and I got it all back 3 days ago. And so it's been 2 weeks exactly to today. And of those 2 weeks, the first 6 days was a massive headache, and I mean really bad headache. But other than that, for me, it was nothing. For my girlfriend, it was a chest cold. It was coughing and heavy chest cold. So simultaneously, you get to hear about two people at the same time. And then when it came to, 6 days in-ish, and it's been 2 weeks, and then I got my taste back. So yeah, so what happened was her cough kind of stayed through the whole thing, and we both had the headache for the first 6 days. The headache went away. It was really bad the first 4 or 5. Then it was draining. It was like both of us we felt like we had mono. It just felt just sitting on the sofa and watching TV was kind of a drain. And so just stayed low key, and we stayed isolated, didn't do anything for Thanksgiving, which is didn't matter to me. I literally could not taste food. And then 3 days ago, I was able to smell the bacon and eggs cooking. And this is where it got a little weird for everyone. I could not taste the food. So I could smell, but I couldn't taste. I would get just a slight a nanosecond of flavor. And then the next day I could taste, but I couldn't taste every bite, and I couldn't smell all the time. So that was weird. I had a little bit of both. And then yesterday I was able to taste and smell. And for those of you who play string instruments or have, I played the violin, and it was like the mute was on the bridge for the strings, so that you hear all the notes, but everything's been muted. That's what my taste and my smell was like. I could tell exactly that it was bacon or exactly that it was eggs, and I could smell it and I could taste it, but everything was muted. But the headache the headache had gone away after about a week. For me, I never experienced. I had a little bit of a runny nose, but the reality is I could breathe through my nose. I could breathe in my lungs. I was just tired. And that was it. That's all that's happened. And now it's been 2 weeks, and I can taste, I can smell. I'm a little tired, but other than that, it's been a very mild cold is essentially what I had.
So it's fair to say that you have no pre-existing conditions.
I think the statement is everybody must have something, but for people out there to know, I'm in my 40s. I am a rock climber, and I know that with everything shut down and it's been very light, but I consider myself, I've been paleo, despite the lockdown, kind of testing that. I don't have a lot of I don't have pre-existing conditions, but I am someone who has been a paleo for about 10 years, which means that I eat less than 30 grams of sugar a day. I have never smoked because I had allergies, but they went away when I went paleo. I don't do anything else because they're like, well, do you try drugs? And I'm like, I'm allergic to nuts. Why would I can't do anything else. So for a lot of people, I'm a bit of a teetotaler. I do love scotch. I do drink scotch, but for the most part, being paleo, no grains, low sugar intake. I do drink coffee and I do drink espresso in the morning, but other than that, I have a very fit and active young lifestyle because I climb, and that works every muscle group. And so I am very active. I do a lot of barefoot running or walking. I'm a practitioner of Wim Hof.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You just said you do a lot of barefoot running?
Yeah, and walking.
You will run barefoot, like what, down the road?
Yeah, so like I have the Tara Umara, the Zero shoes that are basically like a flap of rubber.
Are you talking about the shoes with the little mitten gloves?
Like the Vibram, the Vibram, the 5-finger shoes. Yes,
yeah.
I have those, but these are just rope straps, and they're based on the shoe that was talked about in Christopher McDougall's Born to Run. So it's basically just the Tarahumara are a northern tribe, native group in northern Mexico that run 120,
so you're not barefoot?
No, I'm not, but I'm basically barefoot.
You're wearing finger-toed shoes.
No, I'm in a sandal that just has a flat, that company that makes the 5-finger shoes.
That's not barefoot, man.
So I'm basically barefoot. I'm in a flat sandal.
That's not barefoot.
Oh no, when I'm running or if I'm outside and I can get out of any shoe, then I'm out of it. I'm definitely out of my sandal, but the thing that I'm in now is not the 5-finger shoes. What I'm in is a sandal that's just a flap of rubber with a rope holding it around my feet.
Do you understand that you just called them 5-fingered shoes?
Yeah, I know, right? That's what they call them.
Is that the term?
Yeah, the Vibram or Vibram.
I gotta have a little bit of fun. I want to give a shout out to Chuck over listening. He's listening on YouTube Live, as well as I think it's Chuck Bam and Big Cat and Renee. All you guys listening, I know you love it when I joke around and I have fun with the guests, so I'm trying to do that now. I do want to ask you about the headache. So you're pretty much a healthy. It sounds like you're a healthy guy, and the Rona pretty much gave you a really bad headache. Would you say the headache, and I'm only asking because I think there's a lot of fear behind the coronavirus, and I think that if you're healthy, there's probably not much to fear. But I do want to ask about the headache. Is it a constant headache, like 24/7, or does it come and go? Can you get rid of it with aspirin?
Oh
You know
no,
what I mean?
it was constant. There was the headache started the second day full on, and by full on, I'm not opposed to drugs as far as medication that might help you alleviate some symptoms, but for the most part, I try to alleviate things with water. And also, I'm a practitioner of the Wim Hof method. So I take ice cold showers and I do a meditative breathing that helps with inflammation. And I will promise you that the level of migraine status of this headache was like if I even coughed, or like moving quickly was not an option. And if I coughed even, it felt like my brain was, it was just painful. It felt like a really bad migraine, and it did not let up unless you were sleeping or just not moving. If you could just sit still, the headache would stop. But it was, for the most part, if you were going to go try to be active, that would have been a very difficult challenge. So for me, right away, we didn't, I didn't really, I knew I was getting sick. I just didn't want to be around anybody at first. And I did have to go to the studio. I was working alone at my studio, and I took Advil, or no, ibuprofen. I took Ibu, and that alleviated the headache because I wasn't sure what I had the first, couple days. And so I just, I wore a mask where I needed to wear a mask, and I took it seriously in the sense that, hey, I think I'm getting sick and there's a thing out there. So I'm not worried about it. I'm not concerned about it based on the math and the knowledge that's out there. But I knew I was getting sick and I wanted to get this headache to go away. So I did take Ibu for like 2-3 days because it was just pretty tremendous. But then it went away, and the thing is that it was a slight, like my nose was clear, and what weirded me out is 7 days in, suddenly I remember having lunch, and I could taste my food, and I'm like, oh, my nose is a little stuffed. I can taste this food, but it tastes a little like, a little muted. And then by the evening, I thought, oh, I must be tired, and I had lost my sense of smell and taste, but I didn't realize it. And by the next morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't smell or taste anything. The headache's gone, And then
the headache came first.
Yeah, the headache came first for me.
So that was your first symptom?
Yeah, for me it was the headache, and immediately being the one thing that stayed with me from the beginning was being tired. And the only memory I have, and I had it when I was really young, was having mono, where I had the same energy level. I was younger. I was 13, but I had the same energy level. And then every day it was literally like a switch would go off and I would be completely exhausted. And I was sick for like 6 weeks. I had to stay home from school. And I remember every day I was fine. And then at a certain time, the switch would be flipped and I would just be exhausted and I could just lay down and sleep where I was at. And what I felt like pretty much from day 2, I felt really tired, and I thought it was just me fighting the headache at first. And then the headache kind of let up. The whole nose and taste thing came in, but then the whole I'm really exhausted just never left. No matter how much I slept, I could sleep comfortably for the longest I've slept in a long time, well over 8 hours, like maybe 9 or 10 hours, which is not something I do. I frequently, based on my work schedule, I'm generally between 6 to 8 max, but more maybe on that 7 window, a little short. But I was just exhausted. It didn't matter if I slept 9 hours or 10 hours. I'd wake up and I'm like, I'm still tired and I can't smell or taste, and I'm blowing my nose a little bit, but nothing's blocked. Nothing is stopping me from 100% breathing. I just can't smell. And it was weird because I knew I had pressure in my sinuses. That's the other weird thing, is I'm telling you now that I could breathe through my nose Everything was open. It wasn't like a sinus infection or like a cold that I've had before. I wanted it to be like a cold. I wanted to blow my nose. I wanted to be able to like clear my nose, but I could breathe through my nose, but there was pressure in my head, and it was very annoying because it would either lead a little bit back into the headache, but more so it was just, why can't I taste and why can't I smell? And I mentioned that I drink scotch, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I try my Lagavulin, I'm going to be able to smell or taste, and could not smell or taste one peaty drop of my scotch. Could not smell or taste it, not at all.
So it was like doing a shot of scotch, and it was like nothing, like water.
No, you could sense the burn, the intensity, like a spice level. You could sense it, or I could sense salt in the sense, like sweet has almost when you can't taste it, anything sweet, it had a slight, like, not a tartness, but you could tell that it was sweet, but not from the flavor. It was a response that my taste buds were having, but with no context of the smell of, like, I had a little bit of caramel corn and I could sense the sweetness, but we had another corn that had sea salt in it, and the salt, my body and my mind could understand salt more than it could anything else. It knew there's almost a hardness and a texture and a sensation to salt that I had no idea how intense it was until you can't taste it.
Yeah.
But I could sense salt, but not flavors of anything else. And so I had some hot Thai curry, and by hot I mean spice level. I just did a local Thai place, and it was something that I could sense. I could sense the heat, but it even the heat, I'm not saying go out and try a ghost pepper. Don't do that. Even the heat was a little muted. Like, I could tell it was hot, not physically, but in the sense of it, mild, medium, hot.
That is strange, man.
Yeah, it was really weird. It was the whole thing. But then here it is. It's been 2 weeks. And again, about 3 days ago, I got it back, and this is my 4th day of for sure being able to for sure taste and smell, but it still feels a little muted to me, just a little tiny bit.
Yeah.
But like I said, otherwise, I didn't have the comorbidities that are there for people who are at risk. I'm not, in Minnesota, I can't give you the straight statistic right now, but it's just over 3,000 people have died in Minnesota. Of that number, I can tell you a few weeks ago that 2,000 of those were in nursing homes. That's a fact. They were over the age of 60 to 90, and they were in nursing homes in the state of Minnesota. They were, and they passed on, whether it was with COVID and other comorbidities. I can't give you that info right now, but as far as getting sick, dealing with it, for me, because I am an active person, I don't eat. I love my routine. It's not a diet. It is a lifestyle to be paleo. I feel good every day. It isn't something I struggle with. I eat 90 to 100% dark chocolate every day. I still had my espresso in the morning, even though I couldn't taste it. But then I do a lot of greens, a lot of spinach, a lot of kale, a lot of dandelion, a lot of different like turmeric, and I mix a lot of things up into vegetable shakes. I do those daily. And then, things have been slow because of the lockdowns. So I'm not going to the climbing gym. I'm not as active as I was. And so I can't tell you that I'm in tip-top Olympic or competition lifestyle quality here, so just like everybody, it's,
well, you're in better shape than me. I'm pretty lazy, and I drink a lot and smoke.
If you do, but even if that's true, I would get you to a climbing gym in a second. It's too fun not to do. And yeah, and I'm sure there's some great outdoor places too, but here in the Twin Cities, we have Vertical Endeavors, and we're lucky because they were the first climbing gym in the country. when they opened 26 years ago, and it just happens to be, they were in St. Paul, and we're lucky. But right now it's locked down, and instead of climbing 3, 4, 5 days a week, I'm back to zero, or finding a crash pad with a buddy and doing something outside in some urban environment if we're not going to Taylor's Falls or one of the outdoor places. And that really hasn't happened, because not just because it's cold, but it's been the weird snow, not snow, like break records in October. Like what are we doing? Is it winter? Is it not winter? It's been bad. But for COVID, what I guess I would tell people is, if you were if you're fairly active and you walk even, and if you are, remotely can reduce some, in my opinion, I think the paleo lifestyle is a great direction to go, like the Primal Blueprint or Rob Wolf, Paleo Solutions. I think those are Marxist and the Primal Blueprint or Rob Wolf are great places to start. And this goes into self-experimentation, and Wim Hof, actually working consciously on your inflammatory response, using cold water and doing meditation that is immediately effective in a positive way. These are all methodologies that actually do tie into ancient advanced human / megalithic. The research I've done, it is partially about self-experimentation. So instead of being afraid or worried, I think take your concern and look into some of these different, in the last few years, positive gene expression. It's about, it's the simple point is garbage in, garbage out. So it's not about eating food to get skinny. It's or it's about being feeling the best you've ever felt, and being the healthiest you've ever been. Sometimes shows up first and continuously, irrelevant to whether or not you have a six-pack. It shows up in your blood work. It shows up when you go to get life insurance and they test you for everything. And if you're eating right, that's a big secret for everyone here before we get into the real show. If you want to get some really extensive blood work done for basically free, get some life insurance, because they test you for everything, and your triglycerides, your every single marker that you would want to know about your body, you're going to get to know when you go to get life insurance. And I am proud to say that I've been able to, through multiple tests, they've done blood work, and they're like, you have the blood work of either an athlete or a child. And they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I give them the list of the paleo lifestyle, dietary, kind of like where I'm at, and it works well for me. And it's not one size fits all, but when you mix all that with just any kind of exercise, any kind of walking, even being barefoot, just getting back to the ground, like
or in finger-toed shoes.
Well, yeah, but get them off, and even if it's concrete, it is a proven fact that there's an electron exchange. There is a straight up exchange of your bodily electrical current with the earth if you just get barefoot.
It's true. It's called earthing.
Yeah, and it's a real thing, and God, we should get into it sometime. But between that, the diet, something like Wim Hofing with the cold water therapy and the breathing, and just any kind of active lifestyle, I don't care where you are with your health, I think you can dramatically impact yourself for the positive, and mindset is huge. It's not a fake placebo thing. I think your mindset about getting educated, whether it's this disease or something else, I think taking the time to get really, it's not about, there's not a blue-red, there's not a yin and a yang to the facts. The facts are the facts. And if you take some time and look into this disease and others, and really look at what your risk factors are, and look at really against the people who have succumbed to this in the worst ways, there's a lot to be said about what you really have to worry about in the world. And the exciting, fun thing and the positive for the rest of your life really is self-experimentation. And there's a lot that you can start on, irrelevant to whether or not you're healthy or sick. And if you do have it or you think you do, I think that there's a lot to be said about having an informed, positive mindset.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and say this so we don't get banned on YouTube, is that everybody should fear the coronavirus. Fear it, fear it, fear it. And it's very, very scary. And there we go. We won't get banned now. And
Listen to the media for the greater good.
yeah, listen to the media. The media is always right. Put on CNN and listen to what they have to say, and we'll be fine here on our YouTube channel. So I just want to go ahead. Let's go ahead and wrap this up. You can always find Jared's stuff, like he said, notaliens.com. Get a signed book, or you can get it a little cheaper at Amazon. But who wants to get a cheap book at Amazon when you get a signed book at notaliens.com? Remember, you can always find us on the internet, www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on Spreaker, Apple iTunes, and all of your normal podcast catchers. Jared, I really want to give you a big shout out and thanks for sharing your experience with us with the Rona, and we'll be back. I guess we'll be back on Thursday. Until then, batten down the hatches and be safe.